Is there a ceasefire agreement or not? I think that's the big question. A lot of people were cheering, wanting to give Donald Trump the Nobel Peace Prize today for having brokered a ceasefire agreement, which was a very oddly worded ceasefire agreement. The reports were it allowed Israel to, fire on Iran for another 12 hours, and Iran had to just sit there and take it. But there were mixed reports on whether or not either side even agreed to the deal. Israel was flying planes over to bomb Iran anyway. Donald Trump had to call the dogs off with a nasty sounding tweet. They apparently turned most of the planes back after bombing just a satellite. And that was all that they apparently did. But now, here we are. So then people said, okay, well, all right, so then it's all done. Yay, yay, yay. Nobel Peace Prize for Donald Trump. I didn't believe that this ceasefire would hold at all. The Israelis do not have a great track record. They have basically reneged on every single ceasefire agreement that they've ever brokered with anyone ever. So why would it be any different this time? Not only that, but why would Iran trust the United States to have brokered a ceasefire agreement when they were at the negotiating table thinking that they were negotiating in good faith with the nuclear arms deal or the nuclear and uranium, whatever you want to call that deal. And they got attacked by Israel anyway and bombed by the United States anyway. So why would they even trust it? But nonetheless, this is the news that's now pouring out over the last hour. Breaking! Israel's military chief of staff says campaign against Iran is not over. Okay, that was just an hour ago. Breaking! Iranian air defenses activated against drones. Iranian media reports. So also about an hour ago. Also breaking, just in, early intelligence from the Defense Intelligence Agency suggests that recent U.S. airstrikes on Iran's nuclear facilities did not destroy the core of the program and likely delayed it by only a few months. So here we are back at square one. If you thought today, finally, you were going to just breathe a sigh of relief and we just evaded World War III, well, looks like we have not yet, because it looks like they're still ramping up. Meanwhile, I want to show you this story from the Washington Post that came out. This is horrifying and I think really showcases the terror tactics that Israel uses. And I'm not saying other countries don't use terror tactics. Perhaps Iran does as well. In fact, I know that they've used terror tactics as well. But we're not funding Iran. We're not allied with Iran. We don't call Iran our greatest ally. We don't have politicians pledging their allegiance to Iran, waving the flag, and making trips and doing everything that's more beneficial for Iran than for Americans. So that is the issue. That's why we pick on Israel, not because we're anti-Semitic, but because we're funding. They are our greatest ally, and every single politician pledges allegiance to the country. So yeah, we should scrutinize who is our greatest ally? What kind of tactics do they use? Are they actually as moral and innocent as they claim to be? Because this article from the Washington Post really paints a different picture. Here it is, Israel's warning call to top Iranian general. You have 12 hours to escape. They basically threatened the generals, top Iranian generals, as well as their wives and children with death if they didn't surrender within 12 hours, creating videotape saying that they condemned the Iranian government, that they were defecting essentially, that they were, and if they did that, and if they sent that into Israel so that Israel could use it, then they could escape with their lives and the lives of their wives and children. Now, this happened shortly after Iran was attacked by Israel the first time, June 13th. So after Israel did their surprise attack where they wiped out lots of their leaders, people that were just in their sleep, they were assassinated by Israel. They then, after that, called up all of these others who would be next in line to take over and basically said, do this or die. You can escape with your wife and child. Otherwise, you're a sitting duck. So here's the article. People working for Israel's security services who speak Persian, Iran's primary language, called senior Iranian officials on their cell phones and warned them that they too would die unless they ceased supporting the regime of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader, according to 3 people who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss clandestine operations. One of them estimated that more than 20 Iranians in positions of power were contacted. And one thing that Trita Parsi, who was on our show last week, and he's an Iranian expert, an Iranian Israel-U.S. relations expert, and he said the one thing to point out about this story that's, I think, the most terrifying for Israel and the United States is that though they attempted this with 20 Iranian high-up officials, not one of them seemed to have done it. Not one of them. So they're not as easy to manipulate, terrorize, and they're not the fact that none of them, that not any of the 20 actually defected, goes to show that they're much more aligned with their government, their regime, their military operations than the propaganda tells us. Because the propaganda tells us, oh, they're on the brink of collapse all the time. They hate their government. They hate their country. And that just doesn't seem to be. I think they hate Israel and the United States even more, thinking that they're going to come in and tear apart their country and put in the former crown prince as the leader whose family terrorized the people. They want that a lot less. And Washington Post obtained the recording, actually. Let's go ahead and play a bit of the recording. It's in Persian, so you won't understand it, but I'll give you a bit of the translation once we just listen to a little bit of it.
الو سردار سردار سلام علیکم سردار سلام علیکم داری من از کشوری زنگ زنم که 2 ساعت پیش سلامی باقری و
So he says right here, I'm calling you from a country which 2 hours ago sent Salami, Bagheri, and Shamkhani to hell. So they're saying, we killed your guys, and we just sent them to hell. And now for you, and now I'm suggesting you, I think he ends up repeating all of this.
گوش کن من از کشوری زنگ زنم به توضیح میدم خوب گوش کن من از کشوری زنگ زنم که 2 ساعت پیش باقری سلامی شمخانی رو دونه دونه فرستاد جهنم الان تنها پیشنهادی هم که به تو میکنم.
So he says, the only advice I'm giving you right now, I can advise you now, you have 12 hours to escape with your wife and child.
من میتونم بهت پیشنهاد کنم 12 ساعت وقت داری که پاتو بگیری با زن و بچت فرار کنی.
Otherwise, you're on our list right now. You, all of you, one by one, are on the list that I'm looking at, and you're our next targets, is what he's saying to these Iranian officials. He says, and then the Iranian official responds back, how should I send it to you? And he says, I'll send you a Telegram ID, send it. And the general apparently did not send it. In fact, none of them seem to have sent it. So this was, Washington Post said that they did translate the Farsi, I believe is what they're speaking, into English. And the only thing that has been changed on this recording was the sound of the Israeli official's voice in order to protect his identity. That was from the person who supplied it. So it wasn't the Washington Post that did that, but it was the person, let me see right here. It says the phone call. The individual who provided the recording said the content of the audio was not manipulated in any way other than to mask the voice of the Israeli intelligence operative to protect his identity. And the Post obtained the Iranian general's name, but is not publishing it, and has removed his voice from the recording to conceal his identity. So both of them have been concealed in that. But this is what Israel was doing. I mean, to say, look, you've got 12 hours to leave with your wife and child, otherwise you're a target. And they were killing entire families in these terror attacks. And this, a lot of people are saying, wow, that's really sophisticated. That's pretty cool. I mean, the fact that you would do this only a couple of hours after bombing them and targeting some of their lead officials, taking out quite a few of their top guys in these assassinations. And this was meant to scare them. This was meant to say, if you do end up taking over for the last guy, you're on the list too. You're next. You're the next one who's going to be sent off to hell. Some people might say, yeah, this is a really amazing tactic. But a lot of us look at this and say, no, this is not typical military tactics. This is terrorism. This is a form of terrorism. To say we are going to kill you and your wife and child, this is terrorism. And this is not the first horrifying terror tactic that Israel has used since October 7th, because we all know about the pager attack just last year when Mossad planted explosive devices in thousands of pagers distributed across Lebanon. And when detonated remotely, over 40 people were killed, 3,500 people were injured, including civilians and children. And these weren't military devices. Civilians used them. The explosions happened in homes, on sidewalks, in taxis. This wasn't a surgical strike. It was a shockwave of terror delivered with the push of a button. So for all the rhetoric about democracy, about moral clarity, about self-defense, the state of Israel, both before and after its founding, has engaged in tactics that meet every definition of terrorism, targeting civilians, using fear to achieve political goals, spreading panic, sending messages through violence, and not just against Palestinians, not just against Iranians, not just against Gaza or Tehran. We're talking about British officials, U.S. presidents, scientists, and their families. And the worst part about this isn't the rogue actors. The worst part about this actually is the rogue actors who do commit these acts. They end up revered, celebrated, even later becoming prime ministers of the country. So let's walk through some of these acts of terror. Starting in 1947, actually it starts before that, but in 1947, I just want to paint this picture for you. Israel sent a letter bomb to President Harry Truman. Yes, Israelis tried to kill an American president. A Zionist terrorist group called Lehi, also known as the Stern Gang, sent a letter bomb to Truman at the White House, and the bomb was intercepted by White House staff. No one was killed, but the message was loud and clear. Support British control of Palestine, and we'll kill you. That's how extreme these groups were, even willing to attack the very country that would soon become Israel's biggest patron. And you wonder, how did they become Israel's biggest patron and greatest ally? Is it because they use these sorts of terror tactics? We're supposed to believe that these are freedom fighters, that these are our allies. Members of the Stern Gang, by the way, including Yitzhak Shamir, who helped plan these attacks, went on to become leaders in Israel's government. Shamir became prime minister of Israel in the 1980s. From 1944 to 1948, before Israel was officially a state, these Zionist militias unleashed numerous terror attacks against British officials, murdering them in cold blood. These groups declared open war on British authorities. Why? Because Britain was seen as the main obstacle to Jewish statehood under the British mandate in Palestine. So what did they do? They assassinated British diplomats. They killed off Lord Moyne in Cairo in 1944. They sent letter bombs to multiple British politicians in 1947. They kidnapped and hung two British sergeants, booby-trapping their bodies with explosives. They blew up British intelligence offices in multiple cities. This wasn't battlefield combat. This was targeted political violence. Even Winston Churchill called it what it was, a new form of terrorism. And again, many of the men involved in these terror campaigns were never punished. They instead became heroes of the state. Menachem Begin, who led the Irgun and oversaw several of these attacks, became prime minister in 1977. Do you see a pattern? Then came one of the most infamous acts of Zionist terrorism, the bombing of the King David Hotel in Jerusalem on July 22nd of 1946. The Irgun, under the leadership of Menachem Begin, bombed the hotel, which housed British administrative offices. They killed 91 people, Jews, Arabs, Brits, civilians, hotel staff, random guests. Irgun claimed they called in a warning. British authorities said the call came too late or not at all. But even if they had called ahead, I mean, let's be honest, you can't just make blowing up a hotel, okay by phoning it in. This wasn't an isolated mistake. It was part of a broader campaign of terror. And no one went to jail. Nope. In fact, they went into government. So fast forward to 1953. So now Israel's officially a state. It has an army, largely because of these terror tactics. It now has a flag. So what does it do? It sends Ariel Sharon, the future prime minister, across the border into Jordan, into a village called Quiba. His unit demolishes 45 homes, kills 69 civilians, including entire families who were sleeping. This was retaliation for a single Israeli woman and her children who were killed by Palestinians. The world condemned it. The UN condemned it. Even parts of the Israeli government condemned it. But Sharon wasn't punished. He was promoted and celebrated. And that tactic, collective punishment through fear, became the template for how Israel responds to every single aggression against them, as we've seen since October 7th. Just 1 year later, Israeli intelligence recruited Egyptian Jews to plant bombs in cinemas, libraries, and Western-owned buildings in Cairo and Alexandria. And the plan was to blame Egyptian nationalists, destabilize the Nasser government, convince Britain to stay in Egypt. It was a false flag terror operation, planting bombs in civilian targets to achieve a foreign policy goal. It failed. The operatives were caught. The scandal rocked the Israeli government. But once again, no one went to prison. So you can see this pattern of terrorism against governments and their people has been a pattern, not one of self-defense, but of an agenda. And over the last 2 decades, Israel has launched campaigns of assassinations across Iran, car bombs, motorbike drive-bys, remote detonated magnetic mines, all targeting Iranian nuclear scientists, most of whom were civilians under international law. One was killed outside his child's school, another in morning traffic. They weren't armed. They weren't hiding. They were murdered as part of a broader psychological war. Work in this program and you're going to die. And it's not just foreign leaders, scientists, or civilians who become targets. Sometimes Israel turns on its own. In 1995, Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated by an Israeli extremist, not a Palestinian, but a fellow Jew, because Rabin signed the Oslo Accords, a peace agreement with the Palestinians. And the killer believed Rabin was betraying the Jewish people by conceding land. So that tells you what you need to know. And what's worse, Benjamin Netanyahu, who was the leader of the opposition, had spent months inciting crowds against Rabin, appearing at rallies where protesters chanted death to Rabin, and he held up mock coffins. Netanyahu didn't pull the trigger, but he lit the fuse. And after Rabin's murder, well, we all know now, Netanyahu went on to become prime minister again and again and again. In any other country, a man who helped whip up that kind of hate wouldn't be rewarded with power. In Israel, he's become the most dominant political figure of a generation. So when you hear that Israel threatened to murder top Iranian military officials and possibly their wives and children in what would otherwise be labeled a terrorist attack, don't be shocked. You could be outraged, you could be sickened, but don't be surprised, because the historical record shows this is not new. It's part of a long, well-documented pattern. Target civilians, use fear, justify it as self-defense, elevate the perpetrators to political power, and label everyone else the world's greatest sponsor of terror. We would never tolerate this from any other country. If Russia did it, terrorism. If Hamas did it, terrorism. But when Israel does it, we call it targeted strikes, precision. Precision has nothing to do with it. Let's stop pretending. This isn't defense. This isn't justice. This is state-sponsored terrorism that gets rewarded and shielded and continues to be rewarded and shielded to this day. And I'm not saying, again, that other actors are innocent, because they aren't. But we aren't funding those other actors and giving them carte blanche to do whatever it is they want. We aren't allied with them, with every single politician pledging their allegiance to them while waving their flag. We should have a crystal clear understanding of who is our greatest ally and what their modus operandi is. When you understand the past, you can understand the future. And this past, some of it not so distant, but very recent, of using terror tactics, shows us a pattern that we can expect. We can expect more terror attacks. We can expect more of these types of methods to reach their goal. We can expect this. Iran can expect this. The United States maybe should even be expecting this. Maybe could expect it. There's certainly a lot of people on social media who have a lot of suspicions about Israel and maybe perhaps their involvement in certain events that have gone on over the past. Some of them have been documented and confirmed, such as the USS Liberty. Others are speculative. People think that there was some involvement, perhaps the dancing Israelis. I'll just leave it there. Some people even claim that perhaps there was some involvement in the Butler, Pennsylvania assassination attempt of Donald Trump. There's just no way that Thomas Crooks was that good of a shot to even get close to Donald Trump's head. Some people say, well, it wasn't that hard. It was a close enough range. The kid who couldn't even shoot 10 feet in front of him, that wasn't making the rifle club, somehow he was able to get enough training and be sophisticated enough to pull something like that off. And really where the suspicion lies is that there hasn't been any further investigation into it. So people look at that and say, are we not only a nation under blackmail, a nation under bribery, a nation under brainwashing, but also a nation under terror? And we point the finger and look at all of these other groups and say they're the terrorists, but looks like there's a lot of other terrorists who might be around. And I'm not saying the United States is innocent either. I'm not saying that Iran's innocent or any of these other organizations, but we certainly do have a pattern of rewarding terror. And the Israelis have been rewarded almost time and time and time again for these tactics of terror. Why would they ever stop? If it works for you, and if it's been working for you for 75 years, why would you stop? You wouldn't. It's a terror tactic that works. Bribery works. Why would you ever stop? Why would you ever change your methods if they actually work for you? And they've been working for the Israelis for decades, decade after decade after decade. They have had the guts to think about this. When they planted those letter bombs in 1947 and sent them off to British officials and to an American president, that's pretty ballsy. For you as a non-nation, a tiny little region, and you're sending letter bombs to the two most powerful countries on earth, to the leaders of the two most powerful countries on earth, you have no fear whatsoever. You are willing to do anything it takes to ensure your nation is created. And they've continued to do everything that they can to ensure that their nation is created and as secure as they think it should be. And they view Iran as a massive threat, which is why I didn't believe that this ceasefire agreement was going to hold. And by all accounts, what's looking like online at this moment, it doesn't look like it actually did. So we should not be surprised by any of this. We should be expecting. And that is why many of us are expecting that this will ramp up, that there maybe will be even false flag events. There could be all sorts of attempts and perhaps acts of terror and fear and more bribery and more blackmail that's used to get us into a war that Americans absolutely, 100% do not want to be involved in. But our leaders aren't listening to us. They're instead maybe trembling in fear. Maybe they're just swimming in dollars. I'm not really sure which one it is yet. But I know that they're not listening to the American people. And instead, we are marching headfirst into a war absolutely none of us want. Let's face it, prices are still high, and for a lot of people, that means leaning on credit cards just to cover basic bills. But with credit card debt now at an all-time high, millions of Americans are getting trapped by skyrocketing interest rates. That's where American Financing can help. They're a family-owned mortgage lender that's been around for over 25 years, licensed in all 50 states, and they specialize in helping homeowners pay off high-interest debt by tapping into their home equity. And unlike some lenders, their mortgage consultants don't work on commission. They're salary-based, so their only goal is helping you find a loan that actually makes sense. Their customers save an average of $800 a month, and there are no upfront or hidden fees just to find out how much you could save. So you may be able to close in as fast as 10 days and possibly delay up to 2 mortgage payments to create even more breathing room up front. They've helped hundreds of thousands of homeowners, and the reviews on Google says it all. So call American Financing today to find out how customers are saving an average of $800 a month. Call 866-855-1945. That's 866-885-1948. Call American, or you can visit americanfinancing.net/Iverson. Hey guys, thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson Show, which you could check out Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. See you there.